It's the Friendly Fire Show, episode 149 for the end of 2019. Ben, we've made it.
We have finally, and we got some very exciting news.
Yeah.
There's a new Xbox next year. That's far more exciting than anything else we could possibly talk about. So Let's jump straight into it, I think.
Yeah. So at the Game Awards 2019, we got a name for Project Scarlet. That name is Xbox Series X, which kind of sucks right now, I think, but maybe will make more sense in a year. What do you think?
I think so. Initially, I hated it, and I'm still not sold on it because I'm going to have an Xbox One X and an Xbox Series X. Is too close for your average grandparent going in to buy a game. It's going to be confusing. But when I rewatched the trailer just before we did this, it looked to me like it's just called Xbox, and this model is Series X. In the same way that you get an iPhone 10 or iPhone 11 or whatever, it's just iPhone, and that's the model. So I think it's not as crazy as it looks initially. What do you think?
I think that's precisely, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it's an Xbox. It will forever be known as Xbox, and Xbox will also mean, the games that you're playing on PC, and it's that whole like as a service mentality. And it's going to be a little bit of a weird transition right now as we move from the Xbox One X to the Series X. But then we're also probably going to see, I reckon, before the holiday 2020 season, the discless, maybe underpowered version of the Xbox, which will be Series S, theoretically. And then you would kind of just assume that moving forward, there's going to be whatever Xbox generation there is, the high power one and the low power one, and they're always just going to be called S and X, seemingly, which will make more sense down the line, but it'll take a little bit of getting used to right now. I think it's a good idea. I was kind of fighting for Xbox just being the name. And things like Xbox Infinite or something don't make any sense because you can't go from 360 to 1 to Infinite. Like, where the hell do you go from there? So
it's very much in the style of we're going to have regular hardware revisions. We're not going to go 7 years with just one refresh. I think in 2 years' time, there'll be another Xbox. And it'll either be the Series X2 or it'll be the Series something else. In the same way that you update your phone a lot. So, Samsung has the Galaxy line. I think it would be similar to that. And that's what they're going for. PlayStation will do exactly the same thing, but they have a cleaner brand already, and there's nothing Xbox can do about that. They can't go to Xbox 5 and skip 4. They did it with Windows, but they're not going to do it with Xbox. So they can't have as good of a name as PlayStation has.
Yeah. Well, and there's always going to be a PS5 and a PS5 Pro in theory. So it's, I don't know, it makes sense once you get used to the idea, just like people are used to the idea with iPhones now. And like an iPad, I don't know what iPad naming conventions are like, but to me it's just like, that's an iPad. That's the new iPad. Yeah. It's the newest iPad. It's the newerest iPad. I think we'll get used to it. We'll get into its specs and stuff to a certain degree in a second, but I thought we should talk about what it looks like first and what the controller looks like. I guess we'll start with the Xbox itself. It's basically an obelisk, which I think is neat. Yep. So it's about the same width as an Xbox controller and probably 3 to 3.5 times as high. And we've seen it in that vertical orientation, but Microsoft has confirmed you can put it on its side in a horizontal configuration like most of us are used to doing in our TV entertainment units. What do you think of this kind of simplistic yet kind of trendy approach that they've taken for this generation of Xbox?
The first time I saw it, I hated it. I thought that looks horrible. It looks like a PC. It's never going to fit under my TV, and it still won't. Either way, I've measured using an Xbox controller, and it won't fit even horizontally in the slot that my Xbox One X is currently in. So It's going to require some reshuffling. Yeah, I've got a smaller shelf on top. It's a big one down the bottom, so it could be moved there. I just have to remove the switch. It's going to get abandoned to the back of the TV, I think.
Well, you're not a guy who uses discs, are you?
Not really.
Well, then why don't you slap the Tower Xbox behind your TV instead? Or does it need to have a place of pride?
Well, it needs a place of pride. This is probably going to be one of my most expensive items. I imagine it's going to be expensive. But also, there's not that much space there either. I think the vent on top, if it lights up green, that might look cool. So maybe it'll slot in nicely. But we'll see. I think you need to have one to really gauge what it's like. I think just from that one image, it kind of threw some people off. But yeah, just because it's different. So we'll see.
And you're right. The top is like a concave, like meshy kind of texture, and that's where like the console's primary fan will be pushing all the hot air up to avoid a red ring of death. And it does have a green glow that theoretically kind of starts, at least, turning on, maybe pulsating or whatever, as you turn on the console, which is kind of cool, but I also hope you can turn that off. I hope there's a setting somewhere that you can just...
I'm sure you can.
You don't need that to happen.
I think, yeah.
And I'm not sure where I'm going to put mine, to be honest. Like downstairs in our living room, there's a very aerated TV stand. So if it goes on its side, the air will just go to the left and it's not a big deal. I'm kind of debating if I put it behind the TV, like I was telling you to, like just depending on how much air is being blown out or up. But then when I'm in my office where I'm recording from, like every little place where I'd put a console is too small and too kind of walled off, where I've had to take my Xbox One X and put it on top of something just because it was overheating, because the air wasn't, it was like kind of shooting out of the console and like hitting a wall and then kind of just bouncing back at the console. So I think that's more of a first world problem than something that Microsoft needs to be responsible for, but it's interesting.
I do think
I feel like I'm babbling.
I think they didn't think about this, because the main thing people have talked about is it's not going to fit under my TV. And it seems like they didn't consider that. I mean, they came out and said straight away, you can put it horizontal, it's fine. But yeah, I've never heard people talk so much about a new console saying, well, where am I going to put it? So yeah, but I am very glad they've gone, as you said, they've got the vent at the top. Apparently it's very quiet, the same as the Xbox One X. We don't want either a red ring of death situation, and we don't want a giant power brick like the Xbox One had, but we also don't want the massive fans that the PS4 has, where it sounds like it's supposed to take off if you play a slightly intensive game. So I'm glad they've gone for functionality more so than form. It just kind of is meant to slot away. You don't pay it that much attention, and it works well, hopefully. So I'm glad they've gone that way, because that's what I want now.
And we'll get to performance and specs in a second, but I guess we sort of need to dip into that, because this is 4 times more powerful than an Xbox One X. So basically, it's a small computer. And I think Microsoft has done a good job of kind of taking all the stuff that you need to deliver something that will perform as well as this does. But it's also like relatively small and relatively pleasing looking. It doesn't look like a giant computer tower, as an example. But it's kind of getting to that weird trade-off where if we want it to be as powerful as we do, and like I do personally, I want something that it looks amazing and maybe will last a couple of years. Like where's the trade-off? Like it's fairly large, but it needs to be that large because of all the stuff that's packed in. And I'm sure like the power brick isn't an external one. It's in there too. So there's a lot of components in there that are doing a lot. So I think it's relatively small for what it is, but I do understand all the issues. I feel like I'm
and we'll have to see. It's one of those things where looking at an image like that is really hard to gauge. Even though they've used the controller as your reference point, still hard to know what it's actually going to look like. So we need to see one properly. As is quite common, we should mention, when a console is first revealed, often the final version is slightly different, or there's been some tweaks. So, it could still look different. This is a year out still, so they'd still be working on it. It'd be amazing if they said, look at the white one or something, and people all of a sudden change their mind. So, we'll just see what they come up with.
And I guess using a controller to explain its size is also a little bit deceptive, because alongside the Xbox Series X is a newly designed controller, which is a little bit smaller than what we're used to. So Microsoft said that the current Xbox One controller gets about a 95% approval rating. The new Xbox Series X controller gets a 98% approval rating from people, just because it's a little bit smaller and shaped to fit smaller hands more comfortably. So, I don't imagine it's going to be a lot smaller, but it is a different size, which is kind of cool. That's all well and good, but I think that the biggest addition to the controller is something that you have long been an advocate of, Ben.
Yes. I'll
let you take it. I want you to take this.
I've been telling Microsoft for years, they've just been ignoring it. They've kind of been It's no secret that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo all copy each other. That someone comes up with a good idea, the others take it. But for whatever reason, Xbox has just been so delayed on this, thinking that the share fad is going to pass. They finally admitted it hasn't. They've added one in, and that leaves us with the Elite Series 2 without one. So I think you, like me, a lot of people bought one now because they said, this will work with Scarlet. You can buy it now. And we're missing the share button. So it's actually disappointed me more than anything. They've finally done it after I already got my next-gen controller. So I'm not going to use that box one. Very annoying.
Yep. And as part of that, I guess they've confirmed that all the Xbox One peripherals that exist now will work with the Series X. So your Elite Series 2 obviously will work. So will any other controller you have lying about the house. But yeah, I'll end up using my wireless controller, my Elite wireless controller with the Series X, but I will be missing that dedicated share button because I use that share button, or the share functionality, I should say, all the time.
Well, they could fix it. So the Elite Series 2 does have a button where the share button is, and it's for changing between the 3 profiles. So I don't see why they couldn't give you an option in the Xbox Accessories app to say, I want this to now be a share button, and maybe you have to hold down the home button and press that to toggle between profiles or something instead. So it could be fixed. Whether or not they do that, it's a bit of a last-minute change, but I think that would fix it enough for me.
I don't use the profile button at all. I have one profile, and if I change up, controller settings, it's in a game for good. It's not different configurations. So hopefully, the other change that they've made to the wireless controller is it uses the kind of satellite hybrid D-pad that looks like a satellite dish rather than just the traditional D-pad that we've seen on the 360 and the One controller. Which I kind of like better anyway. I don't know if it's a huge change, but it is something that's different.
Yeah, I don't like that. I use the regular D-pad in my Elite. I don't like the satellite one, so I'm not going to use this controller anyway, but yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
There you go. The backwards compatibility, they've said that the peripherals on Xbox One work alongside thousands of your favorite games across 4 generations of gaming, which is good. It'll probably mean all the Xbox One games will work. It'll mean all the 360 games that are currently supported will work, and the same thing for the original Xbox, which makes me sad because I, for some reason, broke down and spent $10 and bought a disc for the original Xbox Buffy the Vampire Slayer game, which I do not think will work on Xbox Series X, but that's my problem and no one else's.
I do not think it will work either, so all those.
But I could go and spend $50.
Not happening.
I could spend $50, buy an Xbox 360, and then have a backwards compatibility machine for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is not important. The performance-wise, I don't want to get into too many spec things because I don't really care about specs, but like I said, it's about 4 times more powerful than the Xbox One X at 12 teraflops, because we love talking in teraflops.
That's a lot of flops.
And to quote, it's a lot of flops. To quote Microsoft... from a technical standpoint, I can read, this will manifest as world-class visuals at 4K at 60 frames per second, with the possibility of up to 120 frames per second, with a whole bunch of other stuff, including support for 8K, and ray tracing, and other neat things that make it more of like a PC, like we were saying, than a console that we're used to playing with, at least.
Yeah.
I like that they mentioned that 8K is there, but I like that they don't really care about it so much. They're kind of aiming for 4K at 60 frames for most games. I would much prefer 1080p at 120 frames, I think. The older I get, I don't see a lot of super 4K detail, at least on the screen in front of me here, my little gaming monitor. And the more frame rate increases I see, I actually notice and appreciate. Not that I'm worried about Twitch reactions and stuff and, getting in extra shots or whatever. I just think it looks smoother and I enjoy that more than crisper, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have a preference now, Ben.
I think it'll be the same as what the Xbox One X does now, where you get to choose, do you want to have a higher frame rate or higher resolution in a lot of games? But 4K 60 frames is pretty much what I want, I think. If it can do that for a lot of things, I think that's a sweet point. And I think, as you said, with 8K, I think it's going to be like the PS4 Pro is a 4K console. Technically, yes, but it has a handful of games, small little games that can run native 4K, but barely nothing. I think it'll be the same with 8K. And you can tell by how Microsoft speak about it now, they don't really care about that. But they just have to say it's there, because otherwise PlayStation will come out saying 8K, we're stronger, we're more powerful. So they do not want to make that mistake like they did with the Xbox One. And I think they're very cautious about wanting to be the most powerful console. So I'd be surprised if the PS5 came out now and was more powerful.
Agreed. And I guess we don't have much else on the Series X right now. We did have the announcement of a new game. The first game from Ninja Theory that started as a Microsoft owned project. I know Bleeding Edge is there, but that started before the acquisition. It's a sequel to Hellblade called Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. And we saw a little bit of a preview with in-game footage rendered on the Xbox Series X. It just looked like a bunch of people screaming. Like, I liked Hellblade. I'm not just like super excited about the sequel, to be honest. I'd be more excited to see some like Halo, I think, on it, but whatever, that's just me.
I don't think they wanted to waste that Halo at the Game Awards. They probably will get that soon, I think. But yeah, so it has kicked off we're in new generation territory, because at the start of a gen or just before it comes out, there's always these trailers which are, in-game footage. They always say that, but it's never gameplay. So this is not what the game's going to look like. It's what a cinematic in the game may look like. And I don't know why developers and publishers always do this when they market a game. They say, look at this in-game footage. It's so amazing, but it's not the game. Anyhow, that's just what happened at the start of generation. So it's begun.
Yeah, and we got the same kind of thing at the Game Awards with that Godfall, which is a Gearbox published game announced for PS5, and it was the same kind of thing, like, ooh, this is in-game footage on PS5, and it just looked like a cinematic too, so get ready for that, guys. The hype is real. It
is, and it's led us to, what is this thing going to cost? Because I think we're getting a pretty expensive generation is what I would suggest. So the PS4 I should say, was I think $550 when it launched, and the Xbox One was $600 if I recall, because it had Kinect with it.
Yeah.
But that was 2013 when the Australian dollar was much stronger. So I think we have to account for that, and we have to account for this is a pretty big step up. I think this is much closer to more powerful PC tech than what we've had from previous consoles. It's not as far off as a high-end PC. So I would say probably in the $700 to $800 range is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm almost tempted to say like straight up $1,000 and set your expectations there. And if it's a little bit cheaper, you'll maybe feel a little bit happier about it. It seems like it's going to be expensive. But is that too expensive? It's that weird dance of, does Microsoft and does Sony take a bit of a hit and just kind of like take a loss for a little bit? And like, especially in Microsoft's case, they've got this crazy schedule with all these first party games coming out like month on month on month. Like, if you knock the price of your console down a bit and hope that the attach rate goes up a bit, like, you recoup some costs. Eventually the cost of the console will come down anyway. If you start strong, like Sony did with the PS4, like, theoretically you have a long tail of sales. Like, I don't know enough about that side of things to accurately gauge where price is going to come in, but I think it's going to be more expensive than most of us would like.
I think so, but I'm also happy to pay that. Like, I prefer a more powerful console now that's going to last a few years if we're talking about the difference between $100 at launch. I know that's a lot for some people planning ahead, but I'd prefer to just pay more, get a better console now. And I think that's why they're going to do the cheaper model, because they know that this is going to be expensive, so they want to have that secondary option to say, hey, if you want to get into Game Pass, there's another cheaper option, which is 30% cheaper or something. So I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah, for sure.
And Xbox has the advantage of they could pack in, each console comes with a 3 months Game Pass Ultimate. So you can buy the console, you get Halo Infinite, you get Forza 8, whatever we get, you get all these launch games from Microsoft, plus the whole Xbox One back catalog. You don't have to buy anything. You can just buy the console. So I think that is a big marketing hook for them, and I think they should do that.
Yeah, well, and like you so expertly got us to talk to Phil about, good sentence, Steve, at London X019, they also wrote in the Xbox Series X, little Xbox One, Xbox Wire, there's too many Xbox names. What am I trying to say, Ben? In the Xbox Wire post about the Series X, they did reiterate again that your cross-generations entitlements will come across. And they said, starting with Halo Infinite. So Like we asked, if you buy Halo Infinite on Xbox One, you'll get it on Series X. You'll get your achievements coming through, your saves should come through, so that's that lovely like continuity of your experience, which is also, I think, a really big selling point with this transition, you know, and it means that if it is expensive and you can't afford a Series X straight off the bat, you can buy Halo Infinite, you can play it as far as you want, you know, if you then can save enough money to get Series X, you upgrade your console, and you don't have to buy new games. And if you have Game Pass, all that stuff flows through as well. So I think it's going to be a weird, very different transition between the generations that we haven't really seen before, at least on the Xbox side, where obviously the older console will be supported by Microsoft for a little while, but I think it's going to be supported for a longer period of time because the Xbox One, especially the Xbox One X, will be almost like the third tier of Xbox. Like, you know, you have the high Series X, you have maybe the cheaper one, the Series S if it comes out, which is, you know, still pretty good, but a little less powerful, a little less money to purchase. And then you have like the One X, which can do most of these things. It can play a lot of games, and it's, you know, even cheaper to buy. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking out my butt.
No, I think so.
Please save me from my rambling.
I think they're going to do that. They're going to do the tier system, and I think you're right. They are setting us up for having more regular hardware. So your entitlements are going to just be Xbox from here on forward. It doesn't matter. The same as a PC. You know, you buy a game on PC, you can play it on any PC. So that's what we're moving towards, I think. And it is going to be, you know, this might be a $800-900 console to buy at launch, but there's going to be another one in a few years and a few years after that. And I think the generation cycle that we've had is going to be blurred even more. So it started with the PS4 Pro and the One X kind of refreshing mid-gen. I think that's going to become the norm. We're just going to have constant new hardware. So on the digital side, yeah, it's all just becoming one profile. And I think consumer-wise, it's much friendlier, as we already found out, by having all that stuff, no matter which platform you play on. So I think that's really good.
Do you think we're going to see a slight name change come holiday 2020? We'll have the Xbox Series X, maybe the Series S, and then the Series 1, which is the bottom of the pile, just to make it easier for the grandmas and things to understand what's going on.
I think
makes sense, like with this whole naming convention thing.
Yeah, there's two options. I think we're going to have the Series X and Series S, or they're both going to be called Series X and have another subtitle. You know, it's going to be Series X Anaconda, whatever that gets called, and Series X Lockhart, whatever that becomes. They may both be part of that. I don't know. Or as you said, they might be, Series 1, Series S, Series X. Could go either way. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they'll tighten up the Xbox One branding.
Cool. I don't have much else to say. I'm excited. I was not expecting this reveal, especially from the Game Awards, if I'm being very honest.
It was an odd platform.
And it's a good thing that we talked about all the naming convention stuff a couple days before the reveal, just like very serendipitously.
What did Phil tell you? He told you
timing.
That the name would be based on the functionality. So can you now explain to me how Series X explains the functionality?
Well, I can't, but I'm clicking frantically now to get that direct quote coming up. So I asked him while I'm stalling for time if, you know, Xbox 360, Xbox One, that made it difficult to name the next Xbox, especially when we're thinking about Sony and PS1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And he said it wasn't hard. It hasn't made it hard. That was the quote. It hasn't. Direct quote coming up again. Our naming convention has been around what we think the capabilities are. And then he went and detailed what the other Xboxes were named and why. Xbox 360 was about the entertainment experience around the box, and the box being in the center of that entertainment experience. Xbox One, if you remember our branding early on, was always on input, all in one. Those names are really built around the purpose of the box. I don't feel like I need to follow in their footsteps because they're self-contained. So he did explain why 360 and One were called the things that they were. I don't understand how the naming convention based on the capabilities Series X makes any sense, but it might make sense when we have more series coming out. the X is the powerhouse, the S is the slightly less powerful one. It sort of makes sense and it sort of doesn't. I think I'm trying to connect some dots where they might not be connectable.
That might be it. The functionality is that there's several options now, so it's a series of consoles as opposed to just the one that we've had up until now, pretty much. So you get to choose the same way you do with a phone or with a laptop. That may be it.
And we just have to kind of assume that X means the best.
Yeah, well, that S means established that already. Best. I do think that's still confusing for parents. Like Xbox One S, Xbox One X is. We know that, but we're too close to it. I've always thought that's not great branding. It's just not distinct enough. So, but evidently it does work. I suppose the price tag says a lot more than the name of the console for the ultimate consumer. So that's probably their main selling point. It doesn't really matter what it's called.
Well, I don't know. It's better than Xbox Scarlet, I guess, or Xbox Anaconda or Lockhart, which are just cool names that don't really mean much either. So,
yeah,
I think Xbox shot itself in the foot with the 360, and they're just trying to make it all make sense. And I think if they go to the SX kind of thing, it will make sense. It's just going to be that transitionatory thing where they're really going to have to lean on their marketers to ensure that people understand which is which.
I think that's what they've given us.
It's not unattainable.
Yeah, they've given us a year's heads up, so I think we'll get used to it. It's not as bad as Wii U. I think they'll sell it a lot better than that. So. Yeah, I think it'll be fine. We've got a year to get used to it, and we've got a year to be excited, really, because it's kind of beginning now. You know, we've known about new consoles for a while. We've known they were likely to come out next year, but now we've seen one. It's got a name. Now it's real. So, we're in that transition period where the final year of a life cycle is often when a bunch of good games come out, but really we're just waiting for the new one. So, you can officially get excited now. It's happening.
Well, it'll make E3 interesting and maybe anticlimactic. I don't know. Like, I was assuming that we'd see the name and the form factor at E3, and we have both those things now. And I guess I was assuming the same thing from the PS5. Like, obviously we know what it's going to be called, but I thought we were going to see what the PS5 looked like at E3. And I guess that's dependent on Sony being there or not, but that's another story. Like, Sony may still release the imagery of the PS5 in June, but like, I guess Microsoft is just going to focus on games and experiences.
Well, I think that's what they need to do
in the holiday.
They need to.
Yeah.
You know, Sony's already got this stable of first-class games that they can just say, "Look at these. This is the first-party lineup here." Xbox has been struggling for a while. They've been buying up studios, so I think Phil knows that. Xbox does have its reputation back. I think they got it with the One X, that it's the most powerful console, so they need to maintain that. But more importantly, they need to say, look at these games you can only get on Xbox and Windows 10. So that's his focus at E3, I think. And, of course, the price. E3 has always been the place where someone walks in on stage and just says $399 or whatever. That's always happened with consoles, so I think we'll have the battle of the prices, and I think PlayStation will probably show off their form factor before E3. Because Sony is not a fan of E3, so... at least in last year they weren't. Yeah. So I don't think they'll show their console there. I think they'll do it on their own thing beforehand. And we'll know before we go in.
Interesting times. And before that, Resident Evil 3 in April. And I'm super pumped for it. But that has nothing to do with Xbox One or Xbox Series X. So I'll shut up now. Anything you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
No, that's about it. I think we've pretty much covered every little thing we can. I think Microsoft threw some people off with an unexpected design and a very functional name, I think, in the end. But they've pretty much said everything you want. They've said, we've got games in development, we've got a powerful console, all your old accessories will work, all your games are coming with you. It's all one ecosystem now. So they said everything I wanted them to say about it. And now I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Well, I'm sure I'll talk to you not on a podcast, Ben, but thank you for another splendid year. 2019 was crazy amazing.
Very busy, and we've signed up with the Game Awards. That was our last major thing, really, as a judge, basically. So, the end of our year.
Well, Stevivor's Game of the Year awards continue until the literal end of the year and the decade. And the results are going to be slightly different than that of the Game Awards, let's just say. But it should be good. It'll be fun. Thank you for another amazing year, and people who are listening as well, of course. And be safe during the holiday season, and have a really good time, and rest up. And we'll see you in 2020.
Play some good games. That's all we can end with, really. It's a good time to get into one of those games you haven't played yet.
Or that giant stack of the games you haven't played yet.
Yeah, that
either
massive backlog.
All right. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later. And I forgot to hit stop, so I'm going to hit stop now. Ta-da! I was a rambler.